Every day, we look around us and see the places and people of this world, daily sights that are ordinary or unusual or beautiful. In each century, artists find ways to show us our world from different points of view and give us new ways of seeing. The word Renaissance means rebirth, and the period of history known as the Renaissance began in Italy with a rebirth of interest in the knowledge and art of the past, especially the culture of Greece and Rome. Around 1350, the beginning of the Renaissance signaled a change from the interests of the medieval world. This is the Art Institute of Chicago, where we spoke with an expert on the Renaissance and what made the Renaissance so different from the medieval world.
Before the Renaissance, European painting tended to cover mainly religious subjects, almost exclusively religious subjects, and usually they are presented in the way we see here in this crucifixion. It tended to be unrealistic with flat backgrounds, often in gold. The figures tended to be elongated and seem very insubstantial. And most of the work, most of the painting tended to be of religious subject matter. Medieval painters are very different from Renaissance painters and from painters of today in that they had a very different understanding of God and man and the relation between the two. And they tried to show this relationship in their paintings, in that for them, man was a very small, unimportant part of the world. Man was supposed to spend his time looking toward God and living for God. And God is given a great, much more important status in paintings. As you see in this depiction of the Virgin Mary and Christ child, they're placed on a throne and are much larger than the other figures in the painting. In fact, there's a kind of hierarchy where they're the largest, then Christian saints, such as St. Dominic, is a little smaller, and then the patron of the picture, the man, the Dominican friar who paid for the work, is shown as a very tiny figure in the scheme.
During the Renaissance, there was a new interest in the importance of the individual and in celebrating human achievement. It was an exciting time with new inventions and scientific discoveries. New music, writing, and art all helped change how people experienced the Renaissance world.
Man's worldview changed to some degree. People began to direct their thoughts more toward this world, away from God and heaven, at least in a daily sense. The Renaissance was also fueled by a couple of things. One, there was a growing prosperity, and so artworks were no longer commissioned only by churches and clergy people, by monks and nuns, but also by relatively wealthy merchants who could afford to buy religious works as well as works of classical subject matter. People also began to take an interest in the art and stories of ancient Greek and Rome, and they began to find their ways into the paintings, such as this. It's a depiction of the adoration of the Magi, a religious subject, and yet it's set among classical ruins, ancient Greek ruins. Renaissance artists learned to show perspective first by studying mathematics, because they had to construct these elaborate grids of lines, but also by beginning to use more tools with straight edges, rulers and T-squares, so that they could draw the lines that go to a central vanishing point, as you see here in the very center of the composition. Perspective is very important in the Renaissance. It was a tool that they developed that helped them organize their compositions. As you can see, the perspective in the composition helps to create a kind of grid-like pattern so that you could almost plot the different figures as they appear in space, and you can get some sense of how large they should be in comparison to one another and as they move backward into space. Obviously, the closer they are to us, the larger they are, and they recede into the distance. Well, the use of perspectives also tells us something very important about the Renaissance world, and that is there's been a change since the medieval world in the way man is viewed and his place in the world. Because a world that has perspective, that is measurable, that is graspable, that is rational, is a world that man has some control over. And now man and his place in the world becomes important. Man no longer exists, as we saw in the earlier paintings, in an abstracted, heavenly environment, but there's now a real interest in this world and in man's place in it.
In Renaissance paintings, we see a new vision of the world. This was brought about by technical advances in painting that enabled artists to show realistic perspective as never before, by an interest in the ancient civilizations of Greece and Rome, and in a new focus of subject matter on the earth rather than the heavens. The rebirth of interest in all the arts and sciences began in the Renaissance world and continues in our lives today, in the art of our times, and in the ways that we see the world around us.